the Israeli military has launched huge strikes on Lebanon.
People are absolutely horrified with what could come next.
The headline said dozens were killed in Lebanon, and the mainstream ran with it the way it always does. Casualty numbers, images of rubble, quotes from Lebanese officials, a narrative that positions Israel as an aggressor, raining destruction on a country that is simply trying to survive. That is the story. Here's what the story left out. In the 6 weeks between the April 16 ceasefire and the Israeli military's intensification of operations, 10 Israeli soldiers were killed, 6 of them by a new weapon Hezbollah specifically developed to evade Israeli defenses. And a U.S. official confirmed publicly that Hezbollah had ignored direct warnings to halt attacks that were undermining peace negotiations, not once, repeatedly ignored. And still, when Israel responded with over 120 strikes in a single day, the world focused on the Lebanese death toll, not on why it happened, not on what Hezbollah was doing right up until Israel responded, not on the 17,000 projectiles Hezbollah had fired into Israel since October 2023 that turned 60,000 Israeli citizens into refugees in their own country. That context is what the mainstream left out, and that context is everything. Stay with me because the full picture changes what you think about this conflict entirely. Welcome to Your World Exposed, where we take the story the mainstream gives you and show you the side they deliberately left out. Subscribe right now and hit that notification bell. We cover the full story every single week. Drop a comment when this is done. We read every single one. Let us get into it. Let us start at the beginning, because this conflict did not begin with Israel's current strikes. It did not begin with the 2026 Iran war. And it did not begin with the November 2024 ceasefire that Hezbollah violated almost immediately. It began with a decision Hezbollah made on October 8, 2023, the day after Hamas massacred over 1,200 people in southern Israel, the deadliest single-day attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust. Hezbollah made a choice. It chose to open a second front. It began firing rockets into northern Israel in what it called solidarity with the resistance. Nobody forced that decision. No Israeli action that day precipitated it. Hezbollah made a deliberate, strategic choice to begin attacking a neighboring country while Israeli civilians were still counting their dead. What followed was 2.5 years of sustained rocket fire, drone attacks, and anti-tank missile strikes into Israeli territory. Over 17,000 projectiles, 60,000 civilians displaced from their homes across northern Israel. Entire communities emptied, not for days, for years. Under UN Security Council Resolution 1701, Hezbollah was supposed to withdraw and disarm south of Litani River. Israel was required to pull back its forces. Hezbollah did not disarm. It rearmed, and it kept firing. Now let us talk about what specifically triggered the intensification of Israeli strikes, the events that Netanyahu was directly responding to. In the weeks following the April 16 ceasefire, Hezbollah introduced a new weapon into its operations against Israel: fiber-optic guided drones. This is not a minor tactical development. Fiber-optic drones are significant because they are extremely difficult for conventional electronic warfare systems to jam. Israel's existing drone defenses, some of the most sophisticated in the world, were designed around radio frequency communications. Fiber-optic guidance operates on a completely different principle. These drones can evade defenses that would stop conventional systems, and Hezbollah deployed them specifically during a ceasefire. Since the April 16 ceasefire, 6 of the 10 Israeli soldiers killed by Hezbollah were killed by these fiber-optic drones. One soldier was killed in combat the Sunday immediately before Netanyahu ordered intensification of operations, bringing cumulative Israeli losses since March 2nd to 23 soldiers and 1 civilian contractor. These are not abstract numbers. These are Israeli soldiers dying from a new weapon designed specifically to evade their defenses, deployed by a militia that had already agreed to stop attacking during a ceasefire. And a senior U.S. official said publicly that Hezbollah had been warned repeatedly, stop the attacks. They are undermining negotiations to end the broader war with Iran. The warnings were ignored. Netanyahu's order to intensify operations was not a surprise. It was the predictable response to an adversary that was told exactly what the consequences would be and chose to keep shooting anyway. Let us talk about what the Israeli strikes actually targeted, because this detail is what the mainstream consistently buries beneath the casualty numbers. Israel struck more than 120 Hezbollah infrastructure sites in a single day. Not randomly, not indiscriminately. Weapon storage facilities, command centers, observation posts, rocket launch sites. The IDF released aerial footage of a strike showing confirmed Hezbollah infrastructure in the eastern Bekaa Valley, Hezbollah's primary weapons storage and logistics corridor running from Iran and Syria into Lebanon. The strikes targeted facilities used to move weapons into the south. These are not apartment buildings, they are the supply chain of a military organization. The IDF also confirmed that ground forces had expanded operations past the forward defense line, moving beyond the established security zone in order to remove direct threats to Israeli soldiers and northern Israeli communities. Netanyahu said it plainly. Israel is at war with Hezbollah, and it will intensify strikes to crush the organization. That language is direct, unapologetic, and based on a factual assessment that ceasefire language alone has never, not once in 30 years of trying, produced the security outcome that Resolution 1701 was supposed to guarantee. Now let us look at the strategic context the mainstream consistently omits. Israel's goal in southern Lebanon is not territorial conquest. It is the establishment of a security buffer, a zone that prevents Hezbollah from positioning forces within rocket and drone range of Israeli civilian communities. This is not a new concept. Israel maintained a security zone in southern Lebanon from 1985 to 2000. After withdrawing in 2000 under international pressure, Hezbollah spent 6 years rearming, and in 2006 launched a war that killed over 160 Israelis and forced displacement of hundreds of thousands more. After 2006, Resolution 1701 was supposed to prevent that from happening again. Hezbollah was supposed to stay north of the Litani River. UN peacekeepers were supposed to enforce compliance. The Lebanese army was supposed to disarm the militia. Decade after decade of diplomacy. UN resolution after UN resolution. Ceasefire after ceasefire. And every single time, Hezbollah came out the other side with more weapons than it went in with. That is the context for Netanyahu's decision to intensify. Not aggression, the rational conclusion that ceasefire frameworks alone, without military pressure, have never produced the outcome they promised. And here's the detail that puts the diplomatic picture in a completely different light. 3 days after Israel's most intense strikes, Israeli and Lebanese military delegations were still scheduled to sit across the table from each other in Washington, the fourth round of direct talks. The most significant direct military-to-military contact between the two sides in decades is scheduled for June 2nd and 3rd. Israel struck over 120 sites in a single day, and 3 days later, both sides were still planning to negotiate. That is not the behavior of a country trying to destroy Lebanon. That is the behavior of a country applying maximum military pressure to a non-state actor while keeping the diplomatic track open with the Lebanese state itself. Let us be honest about the genuine cost, because this channel does not minimize civilian suffering to score geopolitical points. The Lebanese Health Ministry reported over 3,200 dead and nearly 10,000 wounded as of May 26th. Whatever the military justification for the strikes, real Lebanese civilians, people who are not Hezbollah fighters, have suffered profoundly. These casualties are real people, but the headline that skips over what Hezbollah was doing inside those neighborhoods is not giving you the full story. Hezbollah deliberately embeds its military infrastructure inside civilian areas. Weapons depots in residential neighborhoods, command centers in apartment buildings, rocket launchers positioned adjacent to schools and hospitals. This is not an accusation. It is a documented military doctrine Hezbollah has practiced for decades, knowing that Israeli strikes on legitimate military targets will produce civilian casualties that generate exactly the intentional condemnation currently filling the headlines. The deaths are real, and it is suffering that Hezbollah created by choosing to fight from within civilian populations while pursuing a military agenda that has nothing to do with the welfare of the Lebanese people it claims to represent. The mainstream told you that Israel killed dozens in Lebanon and that Netanyahu ordered an intensification of strikes. Both of those things are true. What the mainstream did not tell you is that those strikes came after 6 Israeli soldiers were killed by a new fiber-optic drone weapon Hezbollah deployed specifically to evade Israeli defenses during a ceasefire Hezbollah was already violating. That the strikes targeted over 100 specific Hezbollah military infrastructure sites. That a U.S. official confirmed Hezbollah ignored direct warnings that Israeli and Lebanese military delegations were still scheduled to meet in Washington 3 days later, and that the same international community condemning Israel's strikes has spent 30 years failing to enforce the agreements that were supposed to prevent this situation from ever arising. Hezbollah chose to fire during a ceasefire. Hezbollah chose to deploy a new weapon designed to kill Israeli soldiers. Hezbollah chose to ignore warnings from the United States, and Israel chose to respond. Israel is pressing harder. The strikes are intensifying. And somehow the diplomatic track is still open. Both things are true at the same time. That is the part the headline never captures. This is Your World Exposed. The story is never what they tell you it is. If this gave you a perspective you've not heard before, drop a comment right now. Tell us, do you think military pressure or diplomacy alone can solve the Hezbollah problem? We want to hear where you stand. And do not forget to hit subscribe because we are just getting started.